Let me tell you something many older men don't know. Age isn't your weakness, it's your superpower when you know how to use it. Women, especially younger ones, are drawn not just to a man's presence, but to the intention behind it. It's not about trying to be what you're not. It's about stepping fully into what you are. Because when older men do these 4 things, women don't just notice, they go crazy. Not because of how you look, but because of how you make her feel. Let's get into it. There's something deeply magnetic about a man who moves with certainty, not arrogance, not ego, but deep-rooted clarity. You can feel it when he walks into a room. It's not in what he says, it's in what he doesn't have to say. He doesn't need to convince you of his value because he already knows it. That certainty is power. And women, we feel it. We don't just see it, we sense it. Here's the truth. Women are deeply intuitive beings. We are tuned into energy. We can tell when a man is second, guessing himself, when he's unsure of what he wants, when he's seeking validation through us instead of showing up already validated. A man who moves with confusion constantly asks for reassurance. He hesitates before calling. He second guesses his message before sending it. He wonders if he's enough, if he's saying the right thing, if she'll stay, if she's losing interest. That's not leadership, that's not direction, that's not sexy. But when a man moves with certainty, his entire energy shifts. He doesn't wait for her to give him a green light, he creates the path. He doesn't ask, "Do you want me?" He decides, "I want you, and I'm going to show you why I'm worth choosing too." It's not about control. It's not about dominance, it's about intention. And intention is rare in this world of ghosting, games, and emotional detachment. Certainty says, I know who I am. I know what I bring to the table. I'm not afraid of connection because I'm not afraid of myself. And here's the wild part. It has nothing to do with perfection. You can be flawed. You can be healing. You can be figuring life out and still be certain. Because certainty isn't about having all the answers. It's about standing firm even while the questions exist. It's about knowing your core and not letting temporary feelings or outside influences shake that. Women go crazy for older men who live like this. Why? Because they represent emotional safety. You become the anchor in her storm, the ground when everything else feels shaky, the masculine container that allows her feminine to fully open, expand, and trust. She doesn't want to carry the emotional labor of guiding the relationship. She wants to lean in, not lead. But she can only do that if you're someone worth leaning into, and that requires certainty. It's in the way you make plans without fumbling. It's in how you tell her what you want without needing her to say it first. It's in the way you hold eye contact without looking away, without needing to impress, without fearing rejection. She can feel your backbone, she can feel your conviction, and most importantly, she feels safe to let her guard down, because a man who is certain isn't just attractive, he's rare. He doesn't get swept away by every emotion. He doesn't make impulsive decisions. He's consistent, grounded, present, so no, you don't need to be the youngest guy in the room. You don't need to have six-pack abs or millions in the bank. But if you walk in with clarity, with quiet strength, with grounded leadership, she won't be able to look away, because in a sea of boys playing games, the man who moves with certainty is the one who makes her feel something real. And once she feels that, she'll crave it again and again. There's a profound difference between hearing a woman and actually listening to her. Most men hear words, but very few hear the emotion behind them. Very few take the time to sit in the silence between her sentences and ask themselves, what is she really trying to say? The older man who listens to understand doesn't rush. He doesn't interrupt just to share his opinion. He doesn't jump in with quick fixes, advice, or a story about himself. He holds space. He lets her speak. He makes her feel like her words matter, not because he's waiting for his turn to speak, but because he's genuinely curious. And that is rare. That is deeply, deeply attractive. You see, a woman doesn't always want a solution. She wants to be felt. She wants to feel safe sharing the corners of her mind without being corrected, dismissed, or psychoanalyzed. And when you as an older, more grounded man take the time to understand her, she softens, she relaxes. She feels like she's not just another voice in the void. She feels seen. That is intimacy. That is emotional foreplay. Because connection starts not in your touch, but in your ability to hear what's unsaid. When a woman says, "I'm fine," but you sense she's not, and you gently ask, "Tell me what's really going on," that's listening. When she's emotional and spiraling, and you don't tell her to calm down, but you simply say, "I'm here, take your time," that's listening. When she talks about something painful, and instead of minimizing it, you validate her feelings and say, "That must have hurt. I get why you feel that way." That's listening. Older men who have developed this kind of emotional intelligence, they become unforgettable because so many women are starved for real attention, not just attraction, for presence, not performance. It's not about nodding while scrolling through your phone. It's not about half listening until it's your turn to impress her with your opinion. It's about putting your ego aside, about realizing that being a man doesn't mean dominating the conversation, it means mastering the moment. Women go crazy for men who listen to understand because it makes them feel emotionally safe. And when a woman feels safe with you, she opens up not just mentally, but emotionally and physically, because safety breeds trust. And trust builds desire. When you stop trying to be interesting and instead become interested, everything changes. She starts to feel connected. She starts to feel appreciated. She starts to think, "This man, he gets me." And do you know how rare that is? She may have hundreds of guys in her inbox. She may have been on dozens of dates, but the one man who actually listens deeply, intentionally, will stand out in a way no one else does. Because when a man listens to understand, she no longer feels the need to fight to be heard. She doesn't feel like she has to shrink her voice, filter her thoughts, or dumb herself down. She feels valued, she feels respected, and when a woman feels that, she doesn't just give you her time, she gives you her heart. So no, listening isn't passive. Listening is power. Listening is presence. Listening is what separates the boys from the men. And the man who listens to understand, he's the one she remembers. He's the one she trusts. He's the one she lets all the way in. There's something profoundly attractive about a man who doesn't need to perform, who doesn't need to show off, flex, or convince you of who he is, because he already knows. You see, most men are busy trying to be seen while the man who leads with presence is already felt. And the truth is, presence doesn't demand attention, it commands it. Performance is loud, it's showy. It's buying the most expensive thing in the room hoping she notices. It's constantly talking about your achievements. It's seeking validation with every word, every gesture, every move. But presence. Presence is silent, steady, solid. It's the quiet confidence in your posture, the ease in your tone, the way you look at her like you already know her soul and she can't look away. When a man leads with performance, he's always chasing approval. He tries to impress. He tries to say the right things. He tries to be the man he thinks she wants. But when you lead with presence, you stop chasing and you start magnetizing. You're not trying to prove anything. You're simply being grounded, self-aware, emotionally intelligent. Your energy becomes an anchor in the chaos, and women feel it immediately. In a world full of noise, the man who is present becomes peace. In a culture of distractions, the man who gives his full attention becomes irresistible. You're not checking your phone mid-conversation. You're not fidgeting, looking around the room. You're not waiting for your turn to speak. You're fully with her. And here's what most men don't realize. Women don't fall in love with the words. They fall in love with the feeling behind them, and presence creates feeling. It makes her feel seen. It makes her feel heard. It makes her feel like, finally, someone who's here, really here. because that kind of energy is rare. Most women are used to men who perform affection but disappear emotionally. Men who say the right things but don't make her feel safe. Men who promise intimacy but don't know how to sit in silence and just be with her. Presence doesn't rush. It doesn't impress. It doesn't perform. Presence holds space. It's the man who can sit across from her, meet her eyes, and say nothing, and still make her feel like the only woman in the world. It's the man who doesn't need to talk over her to show he's smart. Who doesn't need to flash status to feel important. Who doesn't need to be anyone else because who he is enough. Older men especially have this advantage. Because when you've lived long enough to stop caring about pleasing everyone, when you've let go of the mask and started honoring your truth, you show up different. You stop trying to be the fantasy, and you start being the foundation, and that's what a woman wants. Not just a spark, but a structure. Not just attention, but depth. She doesn't need perfection. She needs presence, and the man who leads with it. He makes her feel held without touching her. He makes her feel understood without speaking. He becomes the one she thinks about when everything else fades, because performance fades, but presence lingers. And when you have it, you never have to try so hard to be desired. You simply are. A man without boundaries is a man without value. Let that sink in, because here's the thing. Women don't fall for the man who says yes to everything. They fall for the man who knows when to say no and says it without apology. A lot of men, especially those dating younger women, believe that being endlessly accommodating will earn them love, that being agreeable and always available will make her stay. But that's not how it works. She may smile, she may nod, but deep down she loses respect. Why? Because boundaries are not about keeping people out. They're about keeping your value in. They show that you have standards, that you have a line, and that line doesn't move just because she's pretty, angry, upset, or testing you. And yes, women will test you, not out of malice, but out of instinct. Because whether she's conscious of it or not, she wants to know where you stand. She wants to feel your strength not just physically, but emotionally. She wants to know, can this man hold his frame when things get hard, or will he bend just to keep me happy? A man who keeps his boundaries earns her respect, and respect is the foundation of real desire. You see, boundaries aren't about control. They're not about making her submit. They're about honoring yourself first, so that what you give is authentic, not resentful. The man who has boundaries doesn't explain them to be liked. He doesn't defend them to avoid conflict. He simply lives them, and women feel that. They feel that edge, and that edge creates polarity. It creates tension. It creates the very thing most modern relationships are missing: masculine leadership. Because when you say, "I don't accept disrespect," and you actually walk away when it happens, she knows you're serious. When you say, "I value time and consistency," and don't chase her when she's inconsistent, she takes notice. When you say, "I need space to recharge," and don't apologize for your silence, she doesn't feel rejected. She feels your depth. You're not trying to manage her emotions. You're managing your energy, and that makes you powerful. A man with boundaries knows that love is not about sacrificing himself. It's about showing up fully and allowing the right person to meet you there. He doesn't beg to be chosen. He chooses and allows the woman to choose him back from a place of mutual respect. And when you show up with that kind of internal clarity, you become magnetic, not because you're forcing her to stay, but because she senses that you'd be just as whole if she left. That's what drives her wild. That's what makes her chase you, because she can't manipulate you. She can't move your line. She can't use charm to blur your rules. And that creates an irresistible level of attraction. She knows she can't walk all over you, so she leans in, not out. She listens more. She values your time more. She starts treating you like the man you already decided to be long before she showed up. So don't drop your standards to keep her. Hold them to filter her, because the man who has boundaries and keeps them doesn't just get the girl. He gets the right girl, the one who's drawn not to his people, pleasing, but to his power. There's a kind of man who doesn't just date a woman, he elevates her. He brings out parts of her she didn't even know existed, not by force, not by fear, but by being a man she can look up to without feeling looked down on. That's the power of mentorship without domination. You see, there's a thin line between leading and controlling, and unfortunately, many men cross it without even realizing. They confuse guidance with control. They mask insecurity with dominance, and they end up shrinking the woman instead of shaping her. But the man who mentors truly mentors is different. He doesn't correct her to feel superior. He teaches her because he wants to see her grow. And here's what women won't always say out loud, but they feel it deeply. We crave a man who can challenge our thinking without dismissing our voice. A man who can sharpen us without dulling our light. A man who knows more but never uses that knowledge as a weapon. This kind of man doesn't lead with ego. He leads with wisdom. He knows how to influence, not impose. He sees potential in her, not problems. He encourages her to speak her truth even if it challenges him. He doesn't feel threatened by her ambition, her ideas, or her fire. In fact, he fans the flame. That's real masculine leadership. Because dominance says, "Be quiet, I know better." But mentorship says, "I see who you can become, and I want to walk beside you while you rise." Older men especially have this beautiful opportunity, because if you've lived, if you've learned, if you've fallen and risen again, you've got stories. You've got insight, you've got perspective, but here's the key: share it like a gift, not a rule book. A woman will open up when she feels respected, not managed. She'll lean into your wisdom when it feels like an invitation, not an obligation. She'll trust your direction when she knows you see her as an equal, not a subordinate. Mentorship in the right hands becomes seduction, not the kind that manipulates, but the kind that inspires. Because nothing makes a woman fall harder than feeling like the man beside her believes in her evolution. And yes, sometimes she'll resist it, she'll challenge it, she'll push back, but that's when your presence matters most. Not to overpower her, but to hold your ground with grace, to be strong without being harsh, to be guiding without being gripping. Because domination creates submission, but mentorship creates devotion. The man who mentors without dominating becomes the kind of man she wants to grow beside, not escape from. He becomes her safe space and her stretch zone. He grounds her while helping her reach. And the best part? You don't have to do anything loud or dramatic. You just have to be deeply rooted in who you are and invite her to rise in that energy. You show her what patience looks like. You model emotional maturity. You lead by example, not commands. That's the kind of man who changes lives. So don't try to overpower her into submission. Empower her into transformation. Because when you mentor without dominating, you don't just win her body. You win her mind, her respect, her loyalty, and her heart in the deepest, most lasting way. There's a difference between a man who chases a woman and a man who chooses her, and the difference, it changes everything. The man who chases is usually running from something: fear of rejection, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough. He reaches, he performs, he overextends himself hoping she'll pick him. But in doing that, he forgets his own value. He gives away his power. He turns her into the prize and himself into the beggar, and women feel that. It might feel flattering at first, the attention, the consistency, the effort, but over time, chasing becomes clingy. It feels needy, it feels heavy, because chasing isn't rooted in confidence, it's rooted in lack. But the man who chooses, now that's different. He doesn't chase from emptiness, he chooses from abundance. He's not hoping to be picked, he's already picked himself. He knows what he brings, he knows his standards, he knows who he is and what kind of woman aligns with that. When he chooses her, it's not because he needs her to complete him. It's because he sees something real, something meaningful, something worth investing in, not for validation, but for connection. You see, chasing says, "I'll do whatever it takes to make you like me." But choosing says, I like who I am and I see the value in building something with you. Women don't want to be hunted like prey. They want to be seen, understood, and respected, and a man who chooses her makes her feel exactly that. He's intentional, he's clear, he's direct, but he's never desperate. If she pulls away, he doesn't panic. If she plays games, he doesn't chase, he observes. If she's not reciprocating, he doesn't lower his standards, he steps back. Because he's not seeking permission to be chosen, he's offering an opportunity to be part of something healthy and grown. The man who chooses her doesn't rush. He doesn't need to convince. He simply shows up as a man she can either align with or not. And here's the beautiful part, that calm energy, that non-chasing presence. That grounded certainty, it drives women wild. Why? Because it's so rare, because it feels safe, because it forces her to rise to his level, rather than dragging him into insecurity. A man who chooses her creates space for a mutual pursuit. He invests, but only where there's reciprocity. He gives, but only where he's also received. He shows interest, but not at the cost of his dignity, and that is sexy, because she knows that if she walks all over his effort, he'll walk away. Not out of punishment, not to play games, but because he simply doesn't chase anyone who doesn't recognize his value. Choosing her means seeing her but not losing yourself in her. It means showing up without shrinking down. It means desiring her without needing her to prove anything. And when a woman feels chosen, not chased, she doesn't just feel desired. She feels respected. She feels honored. She feels like she's with a man who doesn't need her, but still wants her. That's a man she can trust. That's a man she'll open up to. That's a man she'll crave again and again. So stop chasing to be liked. Start choosing to be respected. Because the moment you start choosing instead of chasing, you stop being an option and become the standard. You don't need youth. You don't need charm. You don't need tricks. You just need to be a man who leads with depth. A man who owns his space. A man who doesn't try to impress because his existence is already impressive. When an older man does these 4 things, women don't just notice, they remember, and once she feels that, she's not going anywhere.